The Drum Candy Podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
All right, we are back. Welcome into Season 2, Episode 14 of the Drum Candy Podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Appreciate your patience for our week off while I was over at PASIC. We'll get more into my PASIC recap. A little bit of a travel disaster, but the show was amazing. But before we get into that, let's call out our intro beat was submitted by Roger Lewis. Roger says he's using Reaper for his DAW, using Captain plugins to create chords and a bass line to have loops for practicing. He is an media artist. He's playing a 22-inch vintage jazz ride, 21-inch Dervish jazz ride, 14-inch Comagene hi-hats. The drums are Bronwyn Drums, which is a custom company that makes drums using 6-ply Keller maple shells. He has an 8x10, 14x14, 16x20, and a 4 3/4 inch by 14 snare. Drum heads are Evans calf tones on the snare and toms and a coated EMAT on the kick. Microphone setup is pretty simple. SM57 on the snare, a Sennheiser E614 overhead, and an EVP L33 on the bass drum. He says he EQ'd it to have a lo-fi hip-hop sound, and he's using some Slate plugins. That was super cool. We will drop in the video at the end of the episode. You got to see Roger's hands. Super smooth, great touch. It's kind of jealous. You make it look easy where I feel like I'm struggling all the time. But anyway, thanks for submitting, Roger. If any of you would like to submit your beat, I have maybe 2 or 3 more. So if you've already submitted one, be patient. We'll get you in the show here shortly. But if you want to send something, shoot it over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. You can include a video or just audio. And also, I would love to see and hear you. So if you can do like a talking head explaining what's happening, that way I don't have to read it. It'd be cool to have your voice in the show as well. If not, just audio or video is super cool. Send it over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. Okay, a few housekeeping things here. We've got a lot going on here at Drum Factory Direct, including we are putting together some gift packs. These will be actually for sale exclusively on stickshed.com. Again, that's a website that we developed for you to buy drumsticks, some mallets, and accessories. On our new platform, we're testing this new platform. It's fully responsive, mobile ready. So head over to stickshed.com, shop around. We have some pre-packs we're putting together where it'll be like a ProMark stick bag with a few different pairs of different types of 5As. We're going to throw in a free pair of our house brand 5As, some Moon Gel, drum key, all that kind of stuff. So they're great we have a ProMark one, we have a Zildjian one, we have a Vic Firth one currently, and some other stuff in the works as well. The Vic Firth, we have a marching version too, so you can get some Hardimans and some practice tips and that kind of stuff. So be on the lookout. Hopefully they'll be on sale by Black Friday. That's our goal. Over on stickshed.com. These are great gift ideas for a drummer in your life, or if someone in your life is asking you what would be a great gift for you, I would highly recommend it. There's average of $25 savings or something like that per pack. So that's over at stickshed.com. We'll be promoting the heck out of it on the DFD socials and all that, so be on the lookout. Also, all the snare drums that we've been featuring over the past few episodes, I'm going to wrap it up this week. The Bucks County Prime Series snares that we've been demoing and examining, they're all for sale. We're going to, again, try to have those listed on drumfactorydirect.com in time for the Black Friday rush. These are all, I believe they're all selling for $5.99, which is an amazing deal for a handmade custom drum. And each one of these, we'll talk more about them in a bit here, but I think you could just pick any one of them and be happy. But we're going to try to fine tune maybe your selection here in the next segment. But we'll talk about that here in a second. But if any of those drums so far have really caught your ear and you just want to get it, let us know. We can hold it for you before they go on sale on the site. So just shoot me a DM over on the Drum Factory Direct page or my personal page, or email drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. They'll all be open to the public for sale here in a week or so. So if you want one, snag it now. I believe it was in the last episode that I made a call out for anyone who would like to become a music journalist to send me some submissions for, because we're rebuilding the Drum Factory Direct website. We've got stickshed.com that's already up with a bunch of stuff that I wrote. I want to turn this into a platform for all the educators and drummers out there to share their ideas. Just to clarify a bit, what I would like from you at this point would be to send me ideas, which could be a title or an abstract or an outline, or if you have something drafted up, that's great. I don't need to see full drafts at the moment. It's more just the general ideas. Pitch me some ideas, and then we can take it from there. As an editor, I'm used to kind of crafting articles out of just basic ideas. I can help you with that part of it. So what I need now is just the cool, good ideas. So if you want to become a contributor to our sites, just email me, drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. All right, so let's talk about PASIC. Goodness gracious. I've been going to PASIC since 1994. Obviously, those early ones when I was a teenager was just overwhelmingly mind-blowing, and it's kind of hard for me to have perspective of exactly what went down back in those early days. But I will say this year's show, as far as recent, and I'm going back maybe the past 10 years, it might have been the best one that I've been to. An amazing lineup. So it starts, if you haven't been to PASIC, it's a Wednesday evening, Thursday, Friday, Saturday long conference. All the percussion companies and drum companies around the world are invited to come and attend and exhibit. There's clinicians and all different styles of drums and percussion, not just drum sets. You have drum set, you have world percussion, you have classical percussion, you have ensembles, lots of marching, panel discussions. I mean, it's just a non-stop overload of drums and percussion. So if you've never been, you might want to go. I think next year is going to be even better. I am on the drum set committee, so I am kind of involved in a little bit of who gets to be there for the drum set department, but I have so little to do with the actual show. So huge props to Joshua, the executive director, and Mark Powers, who runs the drum set committee, all the logistics team, everyone that's involved in PS. I mean, it's a monumental task to bring all this stuff together, and all of the industry partners who are flying in their artists and putting them up. I mean, it's a heck of a job, and they just absolutely knocked it out of the park. So here's a little bit of a rundown of what I saw at PASIC. I had to live in the 2 drum set rooms just because there's so much going on, and that's the world that we exist in, is a drum set world. So I had to focus mostly on drum set stuff. But, at any time when there was a drum set clinic, there was something equally cool in symphonic percussion or marching or world or technology. But the first thing that I saw on Thursday morning, 11 a.m., Keith Carlock. Top 5 drum soloist, I think, of all time. Just mesmerizing. He probably played a 15-minute opening solo, if not more, and just riveting. The guy's just fantastic. And I'm going to say this probably often. He's someone that if you haven't seen in the room, in the flesh, not being filtered through, microphones and production and a big stage or YouTube or whatever, just to hear him hit the drums, his touch, it can go from overwhelmingly bombastic to just feather light and delicate. He's just an absolute master. And the whole time I was side stage, so I wasn't hearing the microphones coming through the PA so much. So I was hearing just what he was playing off the kit, and fantastic. I've seen him so many times at this point, and every time it's just pure inspiration. So Keith Carlock, an amazing drum set clinic to kick it off. And that was followed by friend of the show and longtime friend of mine, Dylan Wissing, who then went deep dive onto what does it mean to be a session drummer, a remote session drummer in today's situation, the way the industry is now. He played some tracks that he had done with, Eminem and all these big artists, and then just kind of went down the world that he exists in, which is recreating break beats and, how do you do business remotely in this kind of industry. Very informative, great clinic. His Ludwig drum sounded amazing too. And then right after Dylan was Jason McGurr. Again, one of my favorite drummers in the world. He played just some Death Cab tracks, taught a great lesson on how he develops independence and coordination by stacking rhythms and stuff. It's a really, really cool concept. I believe there's a book in the works that he was pulling these ideas from. So fantastic clinician, amazing player, super inspiring, very original with his ideas, his song construction, and just super humble, man. What a great hang that was. Great to catch up with Jason too. And then back in the drum set room, Omar Hakim, again, just a living legend. He was the first clinician I saw at PASIC in 1994. And then to see him again here in 2022, still just doing the thing, super groovy, super musical. His whole kind of slant was, just play for the moment and don't think too much. Don't let self-criticism get in the way. Just express yourself and share ideas with an audience. And he just always sounds so good. What a living legend. Great to see Omar. And after Omar was another friend of the show, Nashville drummer Kevin Murphy. He was in the smaller room where Dylan and Pedrito were, but just absolutely crushed. I was there for sound check, and he was playing some pretty hard-hitting tracks. And just to hear, again, the sound of what he produces coming off the instrument, just so powerful, but just sounded big and full. Superphonic was smashing. Ludwig Kit sounded great. So it was really cool to see Kevin in that environment. He was supposed to be there last year, I believe, but had to cancel for some reason, maybe COVID or something. But it was great to see Kevin. And then to cap off Thursday was the legendary Dave Weckl. What more can you say? What a way to finish off a jam-packed day with no breaks, from literally starting at 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. with Dave Weckl just doing what he does, inspiring and influencing people. 30 years now, 40 years now, unbelievable. And he still sounds amazing. And then on Friday, we had Jim Toscano. If you know Jim, he kind of found a little niche during the pandemic where he was helping drummers set up their remote studios and teaching studios to do Zoom lessons and all that. So he really kind of took over that space. So it's cool to see him at PASIC. Followed him with Allison Miller. Might have been my personal favorite performance of the whole show. She came out and I want to say played nearly a half hour solo based on, was it Sunny Moon for Two? It was a classic jazz standard where she would keep coming back and referencing the melody and exploring and different, putting that phrase into different environments, different feels, it was absolutely tremendous. And she's just such a cool, positive spirit. So that was a great clinic. I've got to get her on the show, so we'll make that happen soon. That was followed with Mike Miley of Rival Sons, just smashing, big, powerful rock drummer. Again, another just great positive energy. And then Tony Coleman, legendary blues drummer from B.B. King's band for many, many years. He came out and just crushed, did the thing. Donald Barrett, who I was not familiar with, he's been working with Lady Gaga. That was the most kind of spirited, energetic, fun clinic of the weekend. He just kind of came out and set the mood right away. Just played beautiful, really positive vibes, great energy. Andy Norell, the legendary steel drummer, he had a performance after that. And then Friday ended with Robert Sput-Seawright and Nate Worth of Ghost Note doing their thing. They had people going crazy in that room. Then on the final day, Saturday, another friend of the show, Damon Grant, gave a clinic on hand percussion, world percussion, fantastic presenter. We're going to be working with him a bit here. He's probably going to be doing some writing for us, so stay tuned for that. Henry Cole, another one of my favorite contemporary drummers. If you're not hip to Henry Cole, check him out. And just amazing flow, amazing touch. Again, another very positive spirit. Just seemed to be the year of just good energy, good positive vibes. So Henry, I'm probably going to get him on the show soon as well. Or my old buddy Mike Johnston, man, 2 o'clock. Was it 10 years ago? He was at PASIC, and that was right before or right after I had booked him on the cover of Modern Drummer. So 10 years later, he's back in the main ballroom and just doing what he does. Sounded beautiful. Had a really beautiful Gretsch, was it a broadcaster maybe? Blue Sparkle kit with his Blue Sparkle, what are they calling it? Brooklyn Standard Snare, limited run of those. I think there's 50 of them available. But, Mike's probably the best clinician out there. Great player. He's really good at delivering information, inspiring. Before his clinic, he had all the logistics people come out and play his kit. And that's Mike's vibe. So that was amazing. Good to see him. Jonathan Barber followed up with another fantastic performance. Another friend of the show. Wow, most of these artists have been on the show, so I've got to book the ones who haven't. I guess that's the next call to action here. Jonathan's great. Got to see him a little bit in the exhibit hall to catch up. Man, what an amazing player. And then the drum set side of PASIC concluded with Benny Greb. Unfortunately, I had to miss it because I was in travel nightmare trying to rebook a flight that got canceled. But enough about that. From all reports, Benny just sounded as great as he always does. He's a handful of conditions I've seen over the years. When I saw him at PASIC 2008 or something like that, I didn't know much about him, and one of the few times where I've just had to give someone a standing ovation because it was just so incredible. And from all reports, he just keeps leveling up. So that was the end of the drum set side of PASIC, and then the last concert was Ghost Note with Sput. Just doing their thing, just putting a proper cap on the show. It's kind of hard to describe it just by giving a quick rundown of all the different things that happened, because there's also the random interactions. Gunnar Olsen, I saw him in the hallway before Mike Johnson's clinic, and that's the first time he and I have actually met in person. He's been on the show, and we've been, in touch constantly on social media, but that was the first time we actually got to hang out for a few minutes. And just randomly, he was walking down the hall and I was talking to someone, and hey, there's Gunnar. So that's kind of PASIC too, and catching up with folks in the exhibit hall with, Paul Francis has his new cymbal company, Cymbal Craftsman, to see and hear some of his work. And Matt Nolan was there from the UK. Our friends from Dream Cymbals. I mean, it's just cool to, and the Bald Man percussion guys. So it's just amazing to catch up, all the random interactions. So anyway, if you've never been to PASIC, I'd highly recommend you put it on your to-do list. They do have group rates. If you want to get a whole bunch of people together, you get discounted rates. So yeah, it's always a fun time. So that was PASIC 2022. Okay, let's wrap up this discussion about wood shell snare drums. I was gonna do a blindfold test with these 6 different drums, and I realized, what's the point in that? I think we're still trying to educate. I'm still trying to educate myself, and hopefully some of you are learning something from this about what do the different species actually do. Where do they really want to be? Where do they sound best? Is there a best? Is there a huge difference between them? So hopefully over the past 3 episodes, you trained your ears a little bit to maybe which type of drum might kind of be most appropriate to you. And then what I want to do here this week is just wrap it up and just focus on what I thought were my favorite tunings for these drums, and just kind of put them all back to back so you can have a final comparison, which one of these might be the best, option for you. Whether you want to buy one of these drums, like I said, they're all for sale. $5.99 is the price. Or if you want to get one built, you can always contact Bucks County. Or if you have, another brand that you prefer that maybe offers some of these options. But so let's just run them down. And again, my preferred tuning was based on how the drum was reacting in my studio on that day, with the kit that I had set up and just the vibe that I was feeling that day. And I focused mostly in the medium low, maybe medium high range, because I think every snare drum, once you crank it to a certain point, the shell kind of becomes less important. The heads become the primary factor in the sound. So you really kind of hear the shell with like medium and lower tunings. So anyway, let's get into it. Let's start with maple. So this is where I thought the maple drum sounded best. But truth be told, the maple drum could work in any situation. Literally, you could take this drum on almost any gig and it'll work. I mean, of the 6, the most versatile? Definitely very versatile. But here's my preferred sound on the maple drum. Okay, next up is birch. I'm choosing birch next because it's probably the second most popular wood used, and it's also maybe relegated to being lesser than maple too often, probably because there's so many different types of birch, and some of the lower price drums over the years have often had birch shells. But this is primo birch. This is the best of the best. And to my ears, this drum just sounded perfect. There's something like full and punchy, but kind of like not pre-EQ'd is a terrible way to describe something. it just does what it needs to do and nothing more, nothing less. Easy to tune, snappy, punchy, dense, responsive. It can be big and full. So here's the birch drum. All right, next up is walnut. Now, I posted, I think each one of these drums I posted on social media separately to kind of feature. Walnut was the one that got the most like, whoa, what is that drum? Like everyone was like, whoa, that walnut drum. And I think that's generally the response with walnut. It's like, wow, that's got something special. Now, I found in certain situations it's not the best choice. But if you're looking for a drum that just is full of vibe and inspiration, walnut is way, way up there. So here's my preferred tuning with the walnut drum on that day. All right, next up, let's go to cherry. Cherry is the one that I was hoping would do exactly what it did, which was like kind of bright and lively and punchy, but also had some vibe to it. Kind of sitting in between, I think of what like maple and birch. Like maple can do everything. Birch does something like really more distinct about it. Cherry, I think, is sitting right in between them. And this is the one that I told Chris, I might have to buy this sucker. So this is the Cherry Prime Series snare. All right, now let's get into the two maybe lesser common, have the more open grain. Let's start with oak. Oak is the drum. I have an oak drum that I use on every gig. I've used it for the past 6 months on just about every gig where I'm taking my own gear, because in different rooms where the acoustics might not be great, oak just hits, gets out of the way. It sounds big and full and warm, and you hit it, and then it just dies down. So then you're just dealing with the drum head. Like, how long do you want the drum head to ring on? Because the shell dies down quickly, and then you've got some drum head resonance to deal with. But this is a great workhorse drum for me, perfect for gigging. So this is oak. And lastly, here's the ash drum. The ash, to be similar to oak, but maybe a little bit more kind of vibe, something a little bit different about it. Very, very cool. Also looks great. So this is the last of our Prime Series wood species drums. All these drums are 5.5 by 14 8-ply shells, no rings. So this is ash, and let's check it out. All right, that concludes our wood species snare drum shootout. Not really a shootout, just more like an informative look at 6 identical drums made from totally different species. Hope you learned something. Hope I didn't bore you too much with too much of a deep dive on this stuff. I've got some feedback from some people at PASIC that you really enjoyed these kind of nerd fests. It's only going to get nerdier from here. But anyway, that's it. Those are all thanks to Chris Carr for building out all these drums over at Bucks County Drums. Let me know if you want one. We can hold it for you. Otherwise, they'll be on sale on Drum Factory Direct here in about a week. Okay, let's get over to our featured artist. This week, I'm interviewing legendary jazz funk drummer Mike Clark. Mike Clark kind of rose to national or international recognition back in 1974 as a member of Herbie. I guess it might have been before that, but he appeared on Herbie Hancock's record, Thrust, legendary band. He joined the Headhunters tour, so it must have been before that when the record with Harvey Bass and Mike joined for the tour. And so he's worked with Herbie for a number of years, several records. Then the Headhunters branched off on their own thing, starting in '75. He's been on record with Eddie Henderson, Brand X. I'm just going through his credits now. It's pretty crazy. His own bands. Gosh, where else do we go here? So many. Jeff Berlin, Charlotte Moffett. He has a project with Michael Wolff. And then this year, the Headhunters put their first record out in, I believe, about 10 years. So this is about their 50th year. The new record is called Speakers in the House. It's a really, really cool record. It's got some classic Mike Clark kind of broken 16th note funk stuff. It's got a swing version of Actual Proof. There's some African influence stuff. There's some New Orleans stuff in there. And then there's some production kind of cool things where they're cutting and pasting and doing some kind of more modern production techniques. Mike sounds great, as always. He's always a fun hang, so let's get to it with Mike Clark.
50 years with the Headhunters, huh?
Yeah.
Now, I didn't realize the band had been around that long until I went back and looked at the date of the Herbie record. So my first question is, what made you guys decide to keep going once the Herbie band was over?
I think what happened was we were kind of all doing our own thing. And, I'm like a bebop guy, so I went way into it, which is what I was doing before Herbie. So I was kind of settled and happy. And Bill Summers and I somehow or another ended up talking just to say hello. And then he said, hey, man, there was a lot of bad vibes and bad blood in the old band. I won't go into all that because it seems silly now at this age. But he was like, we sort of all left on a weird note. What if we did it once and see what happens? And I'm like, yeah, I'm always cool to work. And I love playing with Bill. And so we did. He called, I went down to New Orleans to his house, and Donald Harrison came over, who lived in the neighborhood, to do something. I forget what Donald was doing there. Obviously, they were going to do some kind of project or a gig. And, well, hell, let's ask Donald, man. He's fantastic, as you know, and okay. And so we called Paul Jackson. And I had a manager already. I was on the road with another thing called Prescription Renewal, which is my own band with Scarrick, Charlie Hunter, Robert Walter, DJ Logic, and a bunch of guys. So I said, well, man, maybe we can make something happen here. So the manager I had booked us some Headhunters gigs. Bill reached out to a couple of agents. We went to Europe. We made a couple of records. And then, we ended up, Donald would call and say, hey, you guys want to play Jazz Fest, or do you want to do a spot on Treme, or do you want to do this or that? And then more gigs. And then I would go down to New Orleans maybe to play a jazz gig at Snug Harbor. And then I'd say, well, what the hell, let's just do a Headhunters gig. And then one thing led to another. So on and on and on. And we just kept going. And then we've had some times where we were seriously busy with the Headhunters, and then somehow we'd all go back to our lives and nothing would happen for like 6 or 8 months. And pretty soon, hey, some guy called from Europe, wants us to blah, blah, blah. You want to do it? Yeah, okay, let's do it. And we've had a million great guys come through the band, not really permanent members, but we've had Fred Wesley play with us, and we've had Skerrick play with us, and all kinds of guys. But this Jerry Z, the great organ player, has played with us, and still some on and off does play with us. And then I guess about a year or so ago, we had played with Kyle Roussel and Chris before, and we played with those guys, and Chris Severin and on bass, and we said, man, this is pretty fat. This really works, because Chris can play totally. He's a jazz cat as well as a funk guitar, and he can play all kinds of creative, crazy bass stuff, like right on the spot, make it up right on the spot. He can turn on a dime. So Donald is completely amazing artist. His depth and his knowledge it's intimidating. I mean, this guy can play bebop, post-bop, funk. He can sing African, Afro-Cuban. He's played with all the great Latin stars. He's played with Miles and Tony and Elvin and Art Blakey. And, at length, he knows these cats really well. He didn't just stop by and play a few tunes, And he writes. Once we were in Russia together, and he wrote a symphony with no keyboard. Just he heard it in his head and wrote it down and had it performed several times. No keyboard. He just heard the notes and wrote. I was there. So So I love playing in this band. It just keeps getting deeper and weirder and more out and more strange and more funky and more soulful, and everybody finds a way to play together, like in this situation, because it's not a jazz gig, but it's not exactly a funk gig either, and it's certainly not a fusion type, meaning all of those lines like Mahavishnu. It's not that. It's on the soul side. So anyway, we just kept going. Then we met Devil Hill Management. We met those cats. And they're like, hey, let's do something with the Headhunters and see what's up. And then we had this record. Am I rambling? I have had a big cup of coffee right before.
Keep going, man.
I can just stop me anytime. I want like some kind of stream of content. But anyway, while we were on the road some time ago, we ended up doing this gig in a ship that was docked. The nightclub was an old ship that no longer sailed. It was pretty amazing, and the club was down. You walk down into the hold of the ship, and there was a nightclub. And the guy said, I have a facility to record and kitchens and living space. It's beautiful. It's right on the dock. You guys can record there. We had Reggie Washington with us on bass, the great Reggie Washington, who had played in Branford's band and many bands, and he'd been living in Europe for some time. And Reggie and I were roommates during the old Harlem days uptown in New York, and so we knew each other. And Reg is great. He fit perfectly. So we made this record. Then we sort of put it in the can. Then somehow everybody went back to their lives, and I started doing my jazz thing, and Bill was doing his thing. He had Los Hombres Caliente, and this and that, and Donald was doing everything. And sort of the record, we still did some touring, but the record was sort of on hold. And then when we met Greg and Craig from Devil Hill, they said, well, what do you got in the can? And we said, well, this. So we needed to fix it up a little bit, and kind of, it wasn't completely finished, the record. So I went over to Jerry Z's house. He's got a studio in his house, and we recorded a piece called Vaspuricon. And then we edited a few things, and we had Donald put some horn parts here and there as he saw fit. We all wrote together the pieces, except for Actual Proof, which Hancock wrote, of course. And but we played Actual Proof, but I said, let's play it like with an Elvin style lope. Let's not play it like dun 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 dun. And every time I hear a fusion band play Actual Proof, they play it so fast that it's not funky. And of course, everybody unloads everything they know how to play, and I'm like, let's not do that. Let's swang-a-lang, baby, and make it real groovy. So I love this arrangement. We had Stephen Gordon on piano at that time, and we did some pretty intense stuff. Congo Square, which has some strange sounding African instruments. One African instrument I've never even heard of before. And I think it's a pretty, I think there's something in there for everybody. I actually, as an artist, we barely, you listen to a record a lot when you mix it and you never listen to it again, pretty much, unless somebody plays it or you hear it on the radio, or every once in a while you dig it out. But I've been kind of enjoying listening to this one, like when I'm cleaning the house and doing stuff, which I don't normally do that. So somebody likes this record.
That's a good sign. How does the band, you said you write together, what does that mean? Does it start as an impromptu groove? I mean, how does the process start?
Well, a couple of different, let's see, in this last version, if you will, of the band, how it, sometimes somebody will sing a line or sing something or have an idea or say, hey, man, remember that there's a blues lick that goes like this, or Donald will just come in with damn near a whole thing, or Bill and I will start with a rhythmic underlay and make suggestions, and Kyle, Chris, somebody will start putting their part on there, and then somebody will either sing or play or make up a line. But we're kind of all do this together. Sometimes, but very seldom does a guy walk in with a whole thing already done. Mm-hmm. At least on this record,
mm-hmm.
And plus it was piecemeal the way we did it. We're all in different towns and this, that, and the other. So it wasn't exactly like we all were together and on the road and we wrote and arranged and everything. This kind of went down all in the studio, and it was all on the fly because we're all pretty busy with our solo careers, like for real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you played much of this material on gigs, and have they evolved?
Yeah, we just played SF Jazz, and we played a place called Nectar's in Portland. I think it was either Seattle or Portland. I can't remember. It was only a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, Seattle. Anyway, so I think so. We have played the material also at the Keystone in Baltimore and a little bit in Europe. So we've dabbled and we keep tweaking. But on this last gig that we played, it seemed to have a jazz-like breakthrough. I mean, that word is weird to use, jazz, like splang, blang-a-lang. I don't mean that. What I'm trying to say is like there was a lot of interplay, but it seemed to organize itself. Nobody was stepping on each other. Nobody was trying to play this way or that way. It organically found its way and turned into something that, in my humble estimation, was really interesting. At least for me, it was. I found it really interesting, and I'm the kind of drummer that, unless it's really a conversational, it's not that interesting. I don't mind playing straight pocket, especially if I'm getting paid, or if there's somebody singing some real nasty funk. Mm-hmm. But just to play pocket with a bunch of jazz musicians improvising, and I'm back there chopping wood, I got to really get a good payday to do that at this age and at this point. I'd rather be like Elvin and Train or Tony and Miles and speak to each other and make a collage. Mm-hmm. I don't care what the beat is, whether it's swing, funk, rock, whatever they want to do. So if I'm going to play with some guys and it's not just going to be to make rent, then I want to do something at this age that I find interesting for me. I don't care what other drummers and everybody thinks, I'm way past all that now. So it's a personal investment in whatever remaining time I have left on the dirt ball,
Right.
I'm in it,
Do you have to shift your mindset at all when you go from more of a straight ahead setting to this band, or is it all? It sounds like the language is interwoven, but I'm just curious. Do you have to kind of dust off your funk chops at all?
No, I mean, I definitely can't play swing stuff. I have to play some kind of funky or whatever you want to call it, eighth note or 16 or whatever the numbers are, beat, so you can't play splang-a-lang. Sometimes we do, it can go there, but most of the music is not. So that's the only part. Now, see, I don't have fusion or the language I play is all bebop and post-bop, all from Max Roach, even from Gene Krupa until now. Chick Webb, whatever you want to say, he's the guy, and we're all playing his stuff, no matter who you are, even if you don't know who the guy is. So anyway, but yeah, none of my stuff is like, I don't do any of that. I'm not interested in that. I do like to hear other drummers do that. I think it's great. I'm like, wow, listen to that. But me, all my language comes from jazz, Duke Ellington, all of it till now. Coltrane, Sonny Rollins. I've listened to his, I'm 76 years old. I've been playing since I'm 5. My father was a jazz drummer, so I've been listening to straight ahead acoustic, forever. So that's my language. And I guess what made it unique for Hancock, possibly, is when I play funk, I use, instead of playing quote unquote fills, I play that stuff. And people in the 70s hadn't really heard that before. I had thought of that when I was, I don't know, 14. That wasn't new for, really. That was like my generation. It was like, hey, what else? I mean, we didn't play rock in high school when I was a kid or anything like that. We played some form of swing music or big band or whatever. So I just put that stuff. And so for me, I guess it's a long answer to that question is, no, there's not a big, the volume can make a difference. If the volume's too much for me, then the type of, then I have to resort to some, and I find that shit boring, man. I'd rather hear some other guy play drums like that. That's not what I do. I did Billy Joe and Elvin and all that. Period.
Now, back when you were kind of developing this vibe, was it a deliberate decision? Let me throw this bebop stuff in funk, or I mean, how did you get to that point? And then were there people that were like, "What are you doing, man? Could you just play a beat?"
Yeah, all of that. Yeah. Well, if you have to deal with culturally Beaver and Wally, they're going to be, it's too much, it's too loud. But I mean, so yeah, I ran into that shit. Yeah. But Herbie and those cats are like, I hear you, bro. You know what I mean? They heard it. It wasn't all that deep anyway. I mean, God, it wasn't rocket science. But yeah, like. How did I develop it? I was on an organ gig for 4 years when I was young, and then was farming out to a million jazz bands, and people were starting to play Horace Silver type funk and Mercy Mercy Cannonball. So I'd be on an organ gig where you primarily played mostly swing and shuffles and some boogaloo. So us younger guys got tired of boogaloo and started jacking it out and sci-fiing it and trying to do stuff to it. So my thing was, when I played Mercy Mercy, I started adding all the ghost notes, and then I thought, well, a double stroke roll, 2 on each, or single, or paradiddles. I could do that on the hi-hat and 1 on the snare and fill in with the bass drum. And then I took a lot of Philly Joe stuff and a lot of Elvin and Tony stuff, and just took bits and pieces of it and made beats out of it. And which is kind of what was going to go that way anyway. And I remember the first time I heard Garibaldi, him and I were both shocked because we were both in a similar direction. And so from those organ gigs and playing the jazz gigs, I started doing that stuff. And no, actually, nobody gave me a bunch of gas about it. Everybody was like, "Yeah, what is that? That's really cool." And of course, then there was Paul Jackson and Paul was my very best friends. We were criminals together, and like we did all kinds of antics, girlfriends, hanging out, drinking, what have you. Besides just playing, and we had a million bands together. And he played upright bass. And we played with Woody Shaw and Bobby Hutcherson and Joe Henderson and all these cats. And Paul worked at Sherman and Clay Music Store. He was a manager as well. And he brought we had a music room in this place we rented, and he brought an electric bass that sat in the corner for about 2 years, a Fender Precision. And one day he said, "Play that weird funky stuff you do, that upside down funk thing." And I did, and he put those bass lines to it right away. He took the bass out of the case and played it. And the first thing I said to him was, "Man, if you're going to play bass like that, we need to hire a bass player." Because he played every 16th note, man, And he told me 2 words, and I think you know what they were. And then and so we started hiring out. We started our own little band based on that. We had so much fun doing it, and it became real popular in the Bay Area. We started playing with everybody, and pretty soon I'm up there with an electric bass instead of the acoustic bass. Now that was a big change for me, and still can be weird for me. Because if you try to swing with electric bass, it's real fat, the notes are real thick, and it's hard on the ride cymbal. But for funk, it's cool, unless they turn it up too loud, which to me always destroys the groove. And you can't play any ghost notes or any hip stuff with that going on. You just have to slug out a 2 and 4, which I have students 13 that can do that really well. So that answer all that. Oh yeah, the other thing is too much or too busy. Like I say, in Oakland, it was like a soulful excursion going on there. But every once in a while, I'd end up on Wally or Beaver's gig, and when I did, they'd be like, "I think that's so awful busy, or it's loud, or it's too much. Where's one?" And I'd be like, "It's after 2, bro." And like it's before 2 and after 4. Like it's really, God, please do some homework. But not too much of that. Most of the guys I played with were extremely great. Mm-hmm. I was lucky. Most of them were jazz cats that decided to play funk because it became popular, and we all needed to work. The work and rent is the 2 words. Right. I would have been still just played bebop till the day I rolled over in the grave. It's pretty much what I'm doing now, except for the heads.
I want to come back to the Oakland scene, but first, you just mentioned that about the bass sound, and before we got on, you were talking about that cymbal behind you. So choosing gear that fits the gig, what is your philosophy? What's your concept for that?
Well, because we can't afford to fly our instruments anymore, or take our own instruments, my concept is I have to play whatever drum set that they have. Now, here in New York, in jazz clubs, all the stuff is geared for jazz. All 18 2-headed bass drums, small toms, like a 8x12 and a 14 or whatever, or maybe 2 toms on the bass drum. You don't have a 22-inch bass drum with black dot or heads or whatever, pinstripes or bass drums with that rubber thing that won't let you, so it's all the jazz stuff here. So you don't have to sweat that. You go out on the road, man, you might have a cardboard box for a bit. You get all kinds of stuff like that. If I were to take my own drum for the headhunters, I play my jazz kit, which is an 18-inch DW, 8x12, 14-inch. It's more than enough with now that you got monitors and all this stuff. I do put a little something like moon gel on the back of the bass drum head and tune it down slightly, but it's still, I use the jazz sound for everything. I do have a 22 that's been in storage for, about 14 years. I just never take it out. I do like a 20-inch bass drum for the headhunters, and you can't always, but if I use my drums, it's fine.
And so how do you decide, because some of the tracks, the snare's a little bit dampened and some of the tracks it's wide open. Like what determines that decision?
Well, The ones that may be wide open were done here in New York, and what determines that is the drum set that they have in the studio. And the stuff we did in Europe was a big bass drum, and you have to, I don't even know, it probably had a hole in the head in some, like a dead horse or cow inside of it to get that. When I do that to a bass drum, it doesn't even sound like a drum. It sounds more like a signal. But, rather than argue with an engineer or producer that doesn't understand a jazz sound, I just play what's there and do the right thing. Like if it's a 22, I'm not going to tune it up like an 18-inch bass drum, But I do like, I do like, how the bass drum sounded on those Motown records, man. The toms had two heads, they were tuned up, and the bass drum had that African sound to it. I love that, man. I mean, they knew how to record that stuff and make it right, So depending on the set, I'm not going to go against the grain at this age and this point. I'll try to do the most sensible thing for the record.
What do you look for in a ride cymbal?
Dark note and as much stick as I can get without having it be too tight. I don't like a lot of spread, because if you're playing with trios, you don't want it to roar everybody out of the room. I like a cymbal you can dig in. I'm from the old school, like the ice cream scoop on a cymbal. I like that dirty swing beat, and man, it's funny. I was in a car the other day driving, and Sugar came on the radio, and I was listening to that dude. I think his name is Billy Kay. I met him once. What a nasty ride beat that dude had on that record, man. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, yeah, bro, turning that stick. And so I like a cymbal that's got that kind of back alley thing to it. I don't need all that high-pitched polyester pingy stuff. In my brain, that's how I feel. I hear other guys do it, and they can make it work. I can't. I'm not the kind of drummer that can play any drum set, any surface, any cymbal. No, I'm not that guy. You don't catch it like it's the drummer. It's not the equipment. That's bullshit, man. If you get a cymbal that just sounds awful, and it's like, how are you gonna play it, man? Or how am I'm maybe some other guy. That's fine with me. Let the guy, Mr. Know-It-All, play that cymbal. I'll play my stuff.
Right on.
That rap, I play any cymbal. I play any bass player. I don't care what, Yeah, I know, bro. John Wayne. I know you're bad, bro. I hear you. Believe me, I hear you. I know, right? All right, there's that. Anyway, what else you got for me? Where are you, anyway?
I'm in Pittsburgh.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Not Crawford's Grill, huh?
Yeah, man. Well, that's not here anymore, unfortunately. But Roger Humphreys is still here playing his butt off.
Oh, man, he's wonderful, man. Please tell him I said hi. I love him. Somebody interviewed him the other day. It might have been Jake Feinberg, and he was giving up some great stuff. Art Blakey and all the stuff he used to go here at Crawford Grill.
Yeah, right. Well, let's give a little bit of advice for if you see someone playing the actual proof beat these days. What criticism do you usually have, or what advice would you have for someone to get it a little bit better?
Like criticism is kind of opinion, even though I was the guy on the original. I mean, it's like, so I don't think that when guys play it too fast, I don't care for it personally. That doesn't mean it's not really done well. It's just, we were getting funky with that thing, man, and talking all in between the lines. We weren't trying to be like, it wasn't like a RPM. See how many RPMs we could crank out. It was like some grease, man. So I know what I like, but that doesn't mean that I need to, at this age, for me to, I don't need to talk about another guy unless the guy is not very good and he needs to, or unless he needs to grow and maybe I can help him. And even then I don't offer up too much. I would say play it how you feel it, man. I've heard a lot of guys play it, and some, I'm not going to mention names, some guys I like the way they do it better than others, for sure. You know who can play it to death is Tommy Campbell. He plays it better than I do. I love how Tommy Campbell. There's a video of Tommy Campbell playing actual proof out of all the guys I've ever heard do it. Yeah,
All right.
own take on it, yet he kind of comes out of what we did, tip of the hat, some respect, and then he goes on and does his own. I was like, "Who's that cat?" Oh, it's Tommy. Oh my God!
Nice.
He understood it, man. He understood the funk in it.
Mm.
It wasn't about that's not it. That's not what we were thinking at all. It was more like our version. We were listening real close to each other. That's what it was. It was like. You know how Tony used to talk to all of the guys in the early records. We weren't playing like those guys, but it was that role model, Eldman and Train, all those like real interactive bands where you just didn't play your stuff. You played it according to what everybody else, you were hearing the whole pie. And with Hancock, he can really track you. He's listening to everything. He's like a computer, man. I mean, he can hear your every breath, and you're aware of that when you're playing. And then you become comfortable with him like that, and pretty soon you're doing it too. And that's what I learned from him. I always was in that direction anyway, but doing it with a guy like that, I honed it down a little bit, you know.
So go back to the Oakland thing. You mentioned Garibaldi, and I don't think I know the history on your relationship. Did you know each other, or did you meet as adults? Like, what's the connection, and then how the heck did you both sort of end up doing the same type of stuff?
Well, I love David Garibaldi as a human being, and he's one of the greatest drummers ever. Well, here's what happened, the way I recall it. And you can ask him if this is correct, and his memory is probably better than mine. Just knowing David and knowing me. Okay, so there was a club called the On Broadway, and there was a band called the Reality Sandwich, and this tenor player named Vince Denham, a jazz musician, called me and said, "You want to play with this kind of rock funk band?" Runk. And I yeah, runk. Did I say that? I just kind of knew. Yeah, we were playing runk, man. So I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. $50 a night in those days, or 20, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll play. And it was like a Monday night or something like that. So I went in and I played. And I played a few things, and David Garibaldi, who I did not know from a can of paint, was sitting in the audience. And he came up to me and he said, "Hi, I'm David Garibaldi. I play with these guys sometimes too." And I wasn't psychologically, he said this to me, I wasn't psychologically prepared for what you just played, something I had played, not my entire scene, but I had done something. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. So I didn't even quite get what he meant. But I knew it was some complimentary. It was like I took him by surprise on something, but I had no idea what he meant. So, but I liked him instinctively. I liked him. I like, well, this guy's a smart guy. I liked him, just without hearing him play. So a few nights later, Paul Jackson and I went to the On Broadway, and we were in Jack London Square, which is where it was, and we went to have a drink. And there was a band in there playing, and it was the Tower of Power, and they were not famous. Nobody knew them, and there was only about 6 or 7 people in the club. And I'm like, hey, that's that guy that I met the other night playing drums up there, and they hadn't started yet, And I was checking out his drum set, and I could see the way the drums that he had. He had a Slingerland set with 2 tom-toms, a mounted tom and a floor tom. And he had a Chinese cymbal, and just the way he was set up, I was like, this cat is going to play something, But I had no idea what it was going to be. And man, these cats took off, and it blew my mind. The whole band was rocking, man, and David was knocking out that stuff. And in one way, we're completely different animals, of course. And in another way, we were on a similar path. So I think that's what he meant when he heard me. Because when I heard him, first of all, I was floored at how this man thought and played, and where he was putting things and where he was not putting things was brilliant. The beats were completely wonderful and innovative and new. And I could tell he'd been checking out Clyde and Purdy and Jabbo, and Zig, and And I was like, man, and this cat obviously can play jazz too, so there's something going on here. This cat is sophisticated, and I really dug it, but I also felt the same way he did. Like, well, I thought I was kind of the only guy on this path. I'd never, because I kind of got to it through a drummer named Ray Torres, a great, great drummer who passed away from Fort Worth, Texas. And this dude was busting up the 16th note in the triplet like Elvin style before anybody I ever heard in my life. I had, so he was the guy that sort of triggered this thing up in my brain. Just he did it way different, and it wasn't a lot of ghosting like I do, but some more than I was used to hearing. And then I just sort of went mad with it because I already had this jazz background. I had chops, so I could play all this stuff. And then when I heard Garibaldi, I'm like, wow. And I told him, man, that was great. And we became friends. And then later we were linked in history together, which I'm honored because I think he's a brilliant artist.
Did you ever get together and play drums together, or
no, we haven't. No, but we've certainly discussed. We have a group of really wonderful drummers called the Stick People. And it's Greg Orico, Michael Shreve, the great Lenny White, Dave Garibaldi, and myself. And we interview Larry. So far, the Stick People, you can find us on YouTube or just stickpeople.com. We've interviewed Larry Graham. We've interviewed Stanley Clark. We've interviewed Dennis Chambers. We've interviewed so many guys I can't even think of it. The word is we're getting ready to interview Jack DeJohnette, I think I just heard. And we've Steve Jordan, not just drummers, but all kinds of folks, people who were writers for the scene, back in the day, wonderful interviews and then we hang out with each other too. This was during COVID, so we talked a lot of trash before these interviews, so it's quite funny too, all of the different personalities. And these guys are all serious drummers and serious artists and people away from the drum set too. So
stickpeople.com, you said.
Stick People, yeah. Nice. Yes, the Stick People, yeah.
The Stick People.
Yeah, and the interviews are, well, go ahead.
I was saying I want to check them out. We'll put a link in the show notes to that as well so people can find it.
Yeah, wonderful.
What does a practice session for you look like these days?
Well, let's see. If I have to read a lot of music, and I'm like kind of a C-level reader, and I've been a C-level reader since third grade. And I play in big bands, and I do tons of record dates. And it's like still, if I have to sit down and read method books along another drummer, I'm going to get my butt kicked. I studied with a great drummer here named Joe Bonadillo, who really can play and really can read. And then COVID came and threw a wrench in that, and I've been lazy since then. But I have all the books that he. When I find my reading starting to get below, because I'm reading a lot, my band reading is like pretty good, and so I can take care of business if I have to, and do. But my math was poor in school. I've always had trouble with it, and no matter how much I practice the method books, counting and all of that is difficult for me. I'm a natural drummer. I've never had a drum lesson in my life. I taught myself how to play as a child. I could just kind of play Gene Krupa stuff at 4 or 5 years old, and I just kept growing until now. But so I practice out of the books, and then. If there's some jazz type Latin rhythms that I'm weak in or that I've been BSing all these years, I try to tighten that up. If there's something I don't know how to play, then I teach myself to play it. If somebody, I'm going to make a record and somebody sends me an incredibly difficult piece of music, then I shed it here in the room, by myself and figure it out. I work out a little bit on my pad, probably every day, just doubles, singles, and diddle, just to keep my hands up. I'm not Now, what I do is also I just play, but I play different time periods. Like I'll play bebop drums, like all day and nothing but that. Or I'll play post-bop drums all day, or something, or my own take on all of it. Phrases is what I'm trying to get at. I'm always trying to add language, the lexicon. I'm always trying to add phrasing and language and dialects and different things and different ways of turning a phrase and stuff like that. I find that more interesting than practicing one hand to a metronome to make my left hand as fast as my right and all that. I've been done with that kind of stuff for a long time. I do not discourage others to do that. It's just not where at one point, I remember I got all going on this, and I had my single stroke roll up to 112 or something, and it was fairly relaxed. And I could find no place on the kind of jazz gigs I do to play like this. Or I developed the one hand thing like Buddy Rich, just by watching TV, the finger, not the push pull thing, and I find nowhere to do this kind of playing, because if you're playing jazz and you're really in the moment, it's not going to be like, oh yeah, hold on, check this out. The tenor player is going to be like, what are you doing, man? So as an adult, I stopped doing a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean what it used to when I was 21 and go into a drum store and some guy's playing with one hand reel for doing some red, and I'd be like, wow, I must learn to do that. I don't know. Nah, not really. At one point, the music took over. And not the drums, but it became the music. And I realized, God, I could be playing another instrument. It's about the music for me. I love history. I'm always trying to watch documentaries. I'm getting ready to watch the Ron Carter documentary tonight. And I just watched a really good one on Louis Armstrong. I thought it was good, on Apple TV. It's the latest one, and there's a lot of him telling the story in his own voice. So it's not some guy who didn't even know I'm telling the story. It's him, which I found that pretty cool.
I have to check that out. The Ron Carter one is amazing. I watched it last week.
Yeah, I heard it's fantastic. I can't wait. I know Lenny called me and was like, man, you got to watch. Lenny and I are, just for some trivia, we're movie friends. We have a Siskel and Ebert thing where we rate the movies. We go to the show together and have been doing this for many years.
What's your favorite recent non-music movie?
Well, it's a series, not a movie. Since COVID, Lenny and I went to a movie recently. What did we see? I forget what we saw, but something just recently. I can't remember, so it must not have blown my mind that heavy. But I've been watching a series called The Sinner on Netflix that I think is Bill Pullman smoking. I'm also watching Let the Right One In, a vampire movie, but it's not the coffin vampire of the old days. It's some high-tech stuff that I'm digging. And I'm also watching Interview with the Vampire that I'm trying to figure out, do I really like this thing or not? But for some reason, I'm still watching it. I love to see New Orleans back in that time period and all of that. I have a connection with New Orleans. I don't feel like I play like those guys or any musical thing like that. I did play a lot there as a child, but just the city, the culture, the food, the whole, at least, let's put it this way, I like it a lot. I'm not one of those guys that start talking all New Orleans-y when I get there, You ever notice you go on the road with cats and they get to New Orleans and, hey, y'all, let's get us some of this here gumbo. I'm like, bro, you're from New Jersey. You know what I mean? Go get a slice. You know what I mean? Give me that crap. Anyway, how that goes. All right.
All right. So just a couple more questions here. I want to, this is always a hard one for people to answer, but if you had to pick your like Mount Rushmore of influences, who would they be? Your top 5?
Well, it's more than drumming, but I'll do drummers.
Okay.
Well, God. Okay, wait a minute. I'll just do whatever. Okay, drummers, I'm going to have to do this first of all, it would be John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Lee Morgan, uh, what am I doing here? Clifford Brown, Max Roach. I might have gone over the numbers. Man, I'm having a senior moment. Who's the guy from Newark that swings so hard that I love? And
Mobley?
No Room for Squares.
Yeah, Hank Mobley.
Hank Mobley, thank you. Those guys, that would do it, I think. Is that right?
So that would mean all the drummers who played with them would have to be in your top list as well then, right? Or
well, not necessarily. For drummers, it would have to be Art Blakey, Roy Haynes, Tony Williams, Elvin Jones, Max Roach, Art Blakey, Tony Williams, Elvin Jones, Roy Haynes, Art Blakey, Tony Williams, Elvin Jones, Max Roach, Roy Haynes. I dig Kluk a lot. Did I leave anybody out of that thing there? Art Blakey?
and Philly Joe, you'd mentioned a few times.
Jones. Oh my God, and Philly Joe. Sorry, bro. God, he's actually the one. So. Even though I don't play like him, he's the cat I find. I love Jimmy Cobb as well. If I start doing drummers, I'm going to have to name about 70.
Yeah, I know. That's how it goes, right?
Those guys right there are the main deal for me, I would say. Yeah, I do.
Now, if you're going to go to your record collection and pick a record right now, what would you throw on?
There's one out there by Sonny Stitt that I don't know the name of that I just found that I had the other day, and it swings it swings so hard it's unbelievable. I'm going to have to text you and tell you.
Okay.
You need to hear this too, and that you probably already have. But this is, it was in my wife's record side of her collection. I'm like, what the hell is this? And I put it on, and I was like floored. I actually played 3 nights with Sonny Stitt, but this is pretty deep, And,
Do you know who's on it?
No, I just found it the other day and put it on. It's sitting. I think she might have put it back. She's a stickler for putting it back in the, because it's vinyl, and she doesn't want the cats to scratch it. But I will find out and let you know. But it's a killer, man. It's
Nice.
just, oh my God, like the pocket is fierce and the whole thing. I love Lou Donaldson. I mean, God, it's, I love probably all the same guys you do, man. You know what I mean? Like, shoot,
Well, last question is, if you remember, what was your first snare drum?
Gretsch broadcaster. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had when they didn't even call them round badges in those days, but I had the whole deal that everybody's willing to, give their firstborn for now. I had it. I had a bunch of those. As a matter of fact, I kept buying Gretsch, and I didn't even know why. I just liked him, but it wasn't the hip thing to do yet when I had him. I just, and then, of course, in the late 60s with Tony and everybody and Art Blakey and all that, there was no other drum set for me to have. I did have a Ludwig drum set that I used on a funk organ gig for a while because my Gretsch set was sounding too Gretchy, and so I didn't want to tune them down into the funk department, and this organ player kind of wanted a more of a funky thing, so some guy sold me a Ludwig set, and man, that Ludwig snare was barking, Jack, and it's the one I used on Thrust.
No kidding.
In fact, this is it. I don't use it on gigs anymore, but it's in the practice room.
Oh, shoot. What do you got hiding behind the chair? Oh, shoot.
Yeah, that's it. It's the old, it was a super sensitive that some guy before he gave it to me stripped it down and made just a regular old snare out of it,
No kidding. Do you know if that's a brass or an aluminum shell?
Brass.
Aha. That's the sound, everyone. The thrust sound, chrome over brass. Get it?
So, and now I'm a DW guy, and with the advantage for me to that is the DW drums make me play jazz. They make me play everything like me. If I play I have a old Gretsch set, and if I break those out, I start trying to play like Joe Chambers, or I start reliving my Blue Note collection instead of playing me. So yeah, for sure. Even at the that sounds silly, but you hear it and you start playing it. So I don't use the old Gretchen, and I mean this doesn't work. This is me. I'm just talking about me. So I know like a lot of guys that do, and they don't have that problem. They play fantastic, as a matter of fact. But really, the point of this interview is this bad boy right here, Speakers in the House.
That's it.
Make sure you go check out that new Headhunters record, Speakers in the House. Now it's time for a lesson. This week, let's talk about everybody's favorite rudiment, the paradiddle-diddle. The paradiddle-diddle is just like it sounds. It's two singles, right, left, and then diddle-diddle, right, left. So paradiddle-diddle, paradiddle-diddle, starting with the right. Or the left. Left, right, left. Right? Now, here's a way to work on this to get it into a phrase that makes sense in 4/4, because it's a 6-note pattern. You could play triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's cool. But again, I like to put these odd groupings into 16th notes to see how they cross over the quarter note and possibly over the bar line. So if you do this as 16th notes, 1 E and 2 E, 3 E, and when you get to beat 4, play sextuplet. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and triple. So that's 2 as 16th notes and 1 as triplets. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. All right, now there's two ways we're gonna mess with this a bit. Let's talk about the accents. So in that case, I was playing an accent on the first note. 1 and 2, 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Have you ever tried playing a paradiddle-diddle accenting the second note? 1 and 2 and 3. Paradiddle-diddle, 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 paradiddle. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a pretty wicked variation. And then, so now you can combine the two and accent both of those singles. So that's 3 versions of one exercise. Accent the first note. Second note. And then the first 2. Let's try it with a metronome. This is at 120. That's the first note. Let's try that second note. Now the first 2. Pretty cool. Now, like we did in the last lesson, we can move that triplet around. So let's start with the sextuplet.
Or you do one 16th note version, put the sextuplet in the middle, and then another 16th note version. So that would be... That one's pretty weird. That's a little bit like your ice skating, but there's a lot of interesting phrases there when you just, really just focusing on accenting that second note of the paradiddle-diddle just makes the whole thing feel like a whole new universe. Especially in that triplet. Because you end up accenting the middle partial of a 16th note triplet, which is just so rarely utilized. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's pretty cool. So I kind of rushed through this one. So again, let's take it slowly. You can do 2 paradiddle-diddles as 16th notes followed by a sextuplet, accent the first note. Accent the second note. Accent both. That's your 3 versions of that. Now you start moving that triplet around. Let's start with the triplet, accent on the first note. Accent the second note. Accent on both. And now put that sextuplet in between the 2 16th note versions. Accent the first note. Second note. Both. And there you have it. Again, you can just improvise with these ideas. And there's a universe of options. So just, again, take it slowly, like I say every time. Work out each one of these variations with a metronome. Again, internalize the shift between 16th notes and the sextuplet. That's super important. You don't want to blur. If you're playing 16th notes, it has to be accurate 16ths. If you're playing sextuplets, it has to be accurate sextuplets. Also, make sure your accents to taps, big accents, low taps. Super important for clarity and precision. All right, that's it for this week. See you next time.
Okay, we just have one listener question this week. If you have any questions you would like me to answer on the show or maybe send out to someone to answer for you, shoot them to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. This week's question is from Blake Murray. Quick question for Drum Candy. What is your recommendation for lightweight hardware that has the quick change features like quick release washer? How about a lightweight snare stand with a completely adjustable tilter? I don't know of anything that fits all this criteria, but here's some suggestions. Lightweight hardware. I'm using the Tama Classic series stuff, so cymbal stand, hi-hat stand, bass drum pedal, snare drum stand, also a rack tom stand, which is like a snare basket with a slightly different design. That stuff is super, super lightweight. It's kind of vintage style, but it can withstand some modern use. I wouldn't use it on like stages that maybe wobble a bunch or if you're outside in a bunch of wind. But for everyday gigging, the Tama Classic hardware is amazing. It doesn't have a quick change washer, but what I did, there's a company called Pinch Clip that, I don't know if they're still around, but it's these metal washers that you literally, it looks like almost like a stapler or a staple remover. Pinch it, and it just comes off in half a second. I know Tama also has quick release things where you just squeeze them and it can pop off. So if you get the classic stands, maybe get some of the Tama quick release washers, and there you go. As far as the hi-hat, I don't know if Tama has one. Remo has a quick release that's great. Gibraltar has one. Lightweight snare stand, yeah, again, Tama Classic stand, that's the way to go. I haven't checked out, everyone around here is using the Yamaha Crosstown hardware, super lightweight. I haven't put my hands on it, so I can't really confirm, if it's better than the Tama stuff, but that's what I'm using, Tama Classic stand. Okay, we're almost at the end of the show, which means it's time for the warehouse pick of the week. I've been informed that there is a ton of Zildjian merch on drumfactorydirect.com. So if you're looking again for gift ideas, I'm looking at now, we have a Vic Firth backpack, there's baseball hats, there's t-shirts, there's a Zildjian cymbal keychain, mouse pad, the wall clock. We've got Jumbers towels, there's a Zildjian backpack, there's a canteen, there's a water bottle, growler, wristband, sticker sheets, all kinds, snapback hats. So if you're looking for some gift ideas, go check out the Zildjian merch over at drumfactorydirect.com. And that is it for this week's episode. Thank you again for listening. Thanks for your patience with the week off. We might be going every other week for the show for a little bit because we're really trying to put our efforts into launching the new Drum Factory Direct website. But I'm going to do my best to keep it weekly. Next week, we're going to do the 10 Reasons to Love. Back to that special episode with my buddies Tom and Dave here in the studio. But for now, I'm going to let Roger Lewis take over and send us off with his cool beat. And we'll see you next time.